Hello, and like last time we said, we merged the stand-up and the sprint planning meeting so that we have 1 hour instead of 1.5 hour. So we can start with a quick stand-up and share or whatever. I mean, you can skip progress, but you can share what is interesting. Maybe that'll keep the conversation minimum.
Um, so it looks like Crossbeam is going to be relevant again. So I'm doing trying to read up on it again.
Okay.
Actually, what I was talking about wasn't so much the building blocks for that we'll use, but rather just trying to understand what the overall thing is we're trying to build as far as an architecture goes. Because right now we have a mishmash of things we've thrown together, and I don't think they necessarily will play so well together without a little bit of thought put into it.
Hmm.
And I just don't understand the underlying technology enough to have an opinion. So I need to do some research.
Yeah, so I think just let's just take some time to do research because last time we did a quick, like Chris was trying Crossbeam or Tokyo, and then we tried some things out, and then realized that Tokyo is kind of the default or standard in Rust. So again, we went back to Tokyo, and so we didn't do a full good job of understanding like Crossbeam versus Tokyo versus how we would like it and all of that. So let's put that time in.
So just to clarify there, we were using async and Toke.io, and they're pretty much the same thing. And Crossbeam is pretty much the same thing. They're just different implementations of a runtime environment. And it doesn't really matter which one you pick, they're all going to have their own quirks. But I definitely agree with Mark's comment that we need to give some thought to it, but we're also a bit constrained on how the underlying libraries that need to be ran on these asynchronous runtimes actually want to be worked, right? So we got to like respect how the library was intended to be used while still doing something meaningful. And that's not an easy question to answer. So we'll definitely need time on that one.
Yes, that's why I had suggested a whole separate discussion.
Okay. So let's take some time. Maybe next week we can circle back and see if we have some thoughts. Give me 1 second. Okay. Any other updates or stand-up worthy?
Just the exercise that I'm working on with the simple goal of trying to verify that I've put something in the Kademlia distributed hash table has also turned into, my gosh, we can't run Kademlia unless we have the event loop running. So I've arranged the event loop. I'm working on that, but our event loop is rather bloated with a lot of things that have nothing to do with Kademlia. So I've been writing some issues about that. I don't think I need to address those as part of this, thankfully, but they will need to be addressed before we have an MVP. Otherwise, we will definitely have maintenance and performance issues.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to know more about the event loops and can we separate them and all of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the arc. I think that's the architecture discussion Mark wants to have.
You got it.
Like how do we separate into multiple event loops if we want to do that?
Well, I don't. We have things that are in the event loop that don't even need to be driven by an event loop. We have things from the API coming into an event loop, which makes no sense to me because you have multiple threads that are feeding something that's single threaded. Not the best architecture when there's no reason for the event loop to get in the way of something that's already multi-threaded.
Okay. Okay. Things to think about. Anybody else with interesting things to share other than progress?
Yeah, anybody who is reading Rust for Rustations on Kindle, they pushed an update. If you go to Amazon, you can download an update. Not 100% sure what they've changed, but there is an update available.
Yeah. I got tired of reading those books or I got tired of reading the Rust programming book online, so I got a paper copy. So I also have the paper copy of Rust for Rustations. Okay.
One quick thing. I did a couple PRs. They're spread across multiple repositories because the installer is touching the Synapse, the website, and the main repo. So
Okay.
Once those all get approved, I'll get them merged in the right sequence. So try to minimize breaking stuff.
I didn't notice there was more than one, so I left a comment on the only one I saw if we could break it up into smaller ones. But I guess the answer is going to be no, because there's dependencies on other repos. So
Yeah, it's one of these. I tried to look at breaking it up, but there's too many moving parts that have to go at once.
Okay.
feel free to put that as the answer on GitHub, and this way
I did.
it'll be tracked everywhere. So thank you for explaining that.
No
Okay.
problem.
Anything else interesting from anyone?
Yeah, maybe that's maybe for the next part. But since we have Chris Krohn on the call, I think it's useful to have some time to discuss what we're going to do with the Docker pull and push scenarios.
Yeah.
After that.
What I was reading through that thing you sent me, Erwin, and I think we'll just take that as the first thing for discussion today and use Chris's time because I know Chris is kind of being pulled in different directions. So thank you, Chris, for joining today.
Yeah, no problem. I'm happy to help.
Okay. Okay. Right. Okay. I basically prepared for today's sprint planning, and I was doing a poor job because I was unprepared in the previous sessions, and I did not know what was on the board. But today I went through through all the ones that say triage, whether they are in to do or backlog, and at least read through them, tried to understand them, and if I had questions, asked them on each of them wherever I could see them. So that is how I spent the morning today. And we can, if there is no other interesting update, we can mosey into the sprint planning. Yeah? Okay. One second, can you come down? Sorry, I'm on a standing desk and she's sitting on the desk. I didn't want her to fall when I'm looking at the computer. Okay, so Erwin, can you point me to the ticket that you put the note on, or?
Yeah, it's actually an after demo column. It's the title is Explore Docker Publication Scenarios.
Export. Can I search here?
Yeah, you can search. It's just yeah. Explore.
Okay. Okay.
There it is.
This one, right? Okay.
Yep.
So let's talk about this first because there is some context here. And Erwin, can you just sort of tell us the conversation that you and Chris had, and then we can have a.
Yeah, maybe it's best to scroll to the last comment or try to summarize all the IDs. And actually, it's basically it's pretty simple.
Comment,
yeah, the last one. Yeah. So what for who's interested, it's an interesting thing to read and maybe to give another opinion. But what we came up with is basically this. If there is another repository involved, like be it Docker Hub or another custom repository, then actually what we would say is that Pyrsia is taking the upstream repository as the source of truth. So we actually don't, well, what we're actually saying is we won't push to those repositories from Pyrsia. It's just the responsibility of someone who is using this repository to do the publication. And then Pyrsia has a mechanism which is already in place for Docker Hub with a pull-through mechanism that we could also implement for any other custom registry as long as the content is public. So that is the caveat there, but I don't think that's a real issue. So that will be nice. It will work for like Docker Hub content like we have right now and for other custom registries as well. Then of course, that is not a complete picture because we do want to be able to for users and users of Pyrsia to publish content, but that's what we then would call Pyrsia first content, and that would well, basically, at the first state, only live in Pyrsia, and it would get an own namespace or something. That is one of the examples there. Docker push Pyrsia : / and then some path, some image, and that's it. And that can be pulled likewise. So that is what we actually thought of as sort of the future plan. So we have a mechanism right now use existing content seamlessly for end users. And then afterwards, we also will have a mechanism to publish Pyrsia only content or Pyrsia first content. That are the two paths we ended up with. So if there's maybe it's time to get some feedback. And I stop talking.
One quick question on the when you're pushing the Pyrsia first content to with the Pyrsia namespace, will that work similar for like an NPM or a Maven repository to have that kind of like namespace as part of the?
It's probably different in those worlds because they don't have necessarily the repository in the namespace.
Right, that's why I'm curious.
Yeah, so it's really a Docker specific issue, I think, or it's an issue specific to platforms that have the location in their name or in the namespace.
Yeah, that's a terrible leaking abstraction on Docker's part, but it is what it is.
Yeah. So here is what I was thinking, and Baruch, this is something I think we can discuss next week during the meeting, is basically how do we position this and make sure our users understand this flow. Because we are trying to make it so that it's seamless and they can still continue to use the Docker flows. But I think the significant part is that you have to you have to push all the way, right, to Docker when you have the blessed. And this is something that they have to remember. So when they have a release or whatever they call as a release, that has to be pushed all the way to Docker Hub so that their customers can download from Docker Hub. And when they are doing development, or their Docker commands will need to have the Pyrsia : for that particular image when they are doing all the traffic locally.
Yeah, what we could imagine in the end is that someone with a very popular image would publish to Docker Hub, but we could also publish to a Pyrsia specific location, or what would we call it as well?
Yeah. So basically, no, this is I think some kind of, we have to put some content together around education of how to use Pyrsia, how to continue to use Docker, what is a good flow for you to run your CI loops and then push to Docker. What are the appropriate times? And one of the things to underline is like this is a intentional push, right? Here you can do testing pushes and they'll all work and you'll have all these versions. But then this is really intentional, saying that now I'm going to release. There are release notes, whatever, right? There is the proper process, and then when it goes to Docker Hub, it becomes latest, and then it does whatever its usual life cycle is.
Yeah, latest is going to be a tricky thing for us to handle because in a distributed network, it's hard to know what latest means.
Yes, and on Pyrsia, I think we haven't made that decision yet, whether we share share the concept of latest.
Well, it depends on if you
latest
want.
is problematic in a distributed environment, obviously, because everybody can have their own latest. And I think this is where the conversation with Fred next week will be very, very helpful.
Yeah.
Because he might have some creative ideas how to go around it. I don't see how a distributed environment can support latest in the like screwed way it exists in Docker. Speaking about Docker failing miserably in everything dependency management.
Yeah,
we support it. The one thing that I can guarantee is that latest will be inconsistent across the network.
Exactly.
That's what. So should we support it? That's the question. Should we support it? Chris,
well, latest is already in the Docker world. Latest is already has drift built into it. Because if I pull an image based on latest right now, and then somebody goes and updates Docker Hub, and retag something as latest. My version of latest and what's in Docker Hub are two different images. So that problem already exists in Docker Hub. So we're not.
Yeah, it
We're not
does, but
changing-
at least in the world when you have one central repository, the latest in Docker Hub is the correct latest. But in the distributed world, there might be any number of correct latest for any in any second in time.
Well, when you're dealing with Docker Hub, there's always going to be a window. Somebody's updating. You're not sure which latest you got. All that we're doing is making the window bigger.
Hey, can we have Chris from Docker Hub to actually talk about what the concept of latest is? Chris, go ahead.
Well, I guess, yeah. So tags are just freeform text fields. So that's kind of, it's a double-edged sword. Like there are there's the problem that it doesn't have necessarily consistent meaning, but it's also enabled a bunch of flows that are really useful. So a lot of images are pulled by latest. So I think if you don't support it, that'll be a mistake. I think Pyrsia needs to decide, do they want to be eventually consistent or do they want to be synchronous? There are ways to make distributed systems synchronous, like S3 is synchronous that AWS has built. So it is possible. It's really hard. And if you ask me, I would say eventually consistent is fine, especially for now, because if you're if you're, I don't know, what latency are we talking about here? Hours, days, weeks? I mean, this is stuff you need to define in your network, but
exactly.
my guess is it doesn't really matter that much.
There's no maximum latency. Somebody can be offline, the network can be split. There's no maximum latency.
But then, I mean, then it'll be true as well for other things. They won't exist on the network, I guess. So, that's a design decision of Pyrsia, right?
Yeah.
I'd like to also highlight that this problem doesn't exist only for latest. Tons and tons of images like to use major or minor tagging as well. So the actual major tag will move and point to different images. It's not just a latest problem. It's every single tag type of problem. So I think eventually consistent for anything that is connected to the main Pyrsia link network that is actually going to be talking to Docker Hub. If someone runs their own network, they're going to have their own setup. They can be completely disconnected. Why do we care? But I think eventually consistent on the main Pyrsia link network, I think is good enough. And even if it's minutes or hours, how often do you really pull and redeploy your app? So I think
we can,
MVP
and then we can do like best effort latest, like something that is agreed upon the peers which are, or the nodes which are up now, what is the latest among them?
Yeah. So I think we have. I mean, this is a good discussion to have, but I don't think we know all the layers. And like we pointed out, there are a few things to consider. Limit the scope and see what applies to the network that we are building. And there will be partitions, all those things challenging the status of it. But do we all understand the proposal that Erwin and Chris have come up with, that as part of the technique we are discussing? What is it?
So the one question I have is, what is the impact to the CI/CD pipeline on this? Because you're talking hundreds of thousands of updates that would potentially need to be made to repos.
Yeah, this would completely break most of my existing CI for deploying like C++ apps to Docker Hub.
Can you say more? Can you say more?
So this requires a two-step approach, right? I need to build my images and deploy them to Docker Hub. And then I'd have to configure all my deployment side scripts to use a different image name and tag to reference the Pyrsia network specifically to pull that image off the network.
No. I don't think that is for Docker Hub. So that's actually what we are already doing now. So content that's published on Docker Hub, we can seamlessly get from Pyrsia without any changes in end user Docker files.
Can I ask that? Can I ask a question in a different way, and perhaps it'll clarify things? So the public Docker Hub content is completely separate from the Pyrsia first content.
That's true.
That's true.
Yes, because the container images are namespace, right? It's repo namespace image : tag. So you need to be pushing to the source of truth of the namespace, like the owner of the namespace. Otherwise, how would you, for example, if I push to /corona /test on Pyrsia, how does Pyrsia authenticate against Docker Hub and make sure that that is actually put in the source of truth? So I think we need to think about ownership of the namespaces, and that's why it falls this way. I think the longer term solution is you have a Pyrsia node running on the registry, but of course that requires multiple different registries to buy in, which is a whole different discussion. So one day we could hope that if you push to this namespace, if you push to, let's say, Pyrsia //, so Pyrsia in this case is the protocol, because it is a discrete protocol from HTTP, which is what registries currently use. So if you do Pyrsia // docker.io /namespace /image, then you will push it and it'll appear. Maybe that'll make it visible on both, but that way it would have to have some mechanism to handle the auth and things against Docker Hub to validate that you can actually push there.
All right,
Something that we've contemplated is having a proxy sitting between the Persian network and Docker Hub that's responsible for the traffic that goes between, and it will also add some signatures to that. But we'll know that it came from Docker Hub through the proxy, and it can be pulled or pushed either way, because if Persia needs it, they'll say, hey, proxy, I need this from Docker Hub, can you get it? And
I think that's in the comments above, and we discussed that, and that's actually the push through mechanism. I think I described it like that, but that has several. We abandoned that, and this was the proposal. Because it has several issues that we might or might not be able to solve. For one is that if we would start to push from like maybe the developer machine, we could push to Docker Hub and to Pyrsia in some atomic fashion. That will be a problem to start with. Or if we like Mark is saying, do it from a Docker Hub proxy. Then that would mean that we would, as that Docker Hub proxy, we would need like permission to publish any artifact or any image in the Docker Hub. So that has several problems. So that's why we came up with this simplified proposal, like for existing content in Docker Hub and custom registries. We have this pull through mechanism, which is very seamless for end users. They don't have to do anything. They only have to configure their Docker engine basically and run Pyrsia. And then we have a full pull push scenario with a custom namespace for Pyrsia. That's simplified.
All right. So this really gives like an end user like myself two choices. I could either publish to Docker Hub and pull with Pyrsia network, and the Pyrsia network will use the existing Docker integration that we already have type of thing to get the image. That's option one. Option two is I can publish my content on the Pyrsia network and pull it from the Pyrsia network.
Yeah.
And those two images might not be the same in that case, but that's, I think.
Wait, the one that you push to Docker and this might be different.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, right. Because they're separate steps. I can be a dumbass and make a typo in my code, and next thing you know, my tags don't make sense no more.
Yeah, I guess it depends on what use case you're going for, right? I mean, a lot of people who publish open source project software today, they'll publish to multiple places because they want to make sure that people can get them where they are. So maybe you'll publish your image to ECR and to Docker Hub, for example. So I think for open source projects, the idea of publishing to multiple places isn't that jarring. And then on the other side of it, that lets people choose where they want to pull from. And if we provide a pull-through mechanism that it gives you, if people are published to Pyrsia, they can just consume straight from that, but they'll probably have a mix of other things that haven't been published to Pyrsia that they can pull through the proxy with the same technology, which is, I think, elegant.
Yeah,
I would agree.
Yeah. So the way I see it is, if you have a Pyrsia node or nodes running even in close proximity, then this is your best option in terms of performance, in terms of how the protocol works, etc., etc. And that gives you this separation between running experimental stuff and then doing intentional pushes to Docker Hub, where you say, okay, so many of my builds have passed and looks like this is a solid image. Now I'm going to push this intentionally to the namespace that everyone else outside my company can consume, and that is what I'm going to call a release. So there is some education we can do here.
Yeah, it kind of, that's obviously not the only workflow,
Yeah, yeah,
because if you do continuous delivery and continuous deployment, then everything should actually go to production. So it's complicated.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if
I
you-
don't see. Yeah, I don't see
if you-
that the distinction between what Sudhindra was saying, between more permanent changes in Docker Hub and temporary or playing
Yeah, no,
around.
I mean, you can have like you know, call it like build time dependencies which are not released yet, and then you release, but that's only one of the possible ways to release software. And yeah, so all those dynamic tags, dynamic versions, they're always problematic, but when you take it into eventually consistent distributed world, it's just a nightmare.
So
I think it's two different use cases here. I think there's I'm a open source developer publishing my package, and then there's I'm a company running things in production. I think the two are quite different. I don't think in the second case you want to push necessarily to multiple repos. Maybe you do for redundancy or something like that, but I think it's really two different use cases. I do agree that mutable tags have problems. I think some registries like Quay have an option to, or like by default, they only have immutable tags. But I can just tell you that users, developers at least, maybe operators hate this, but developers really like not having to think about that, and they just specify a version and it just kind of magically does what they expect.
Yeah, Chris, that makes perfect sense. The only question is, where do you want this dynamic magic to happen? And I think that's the biggest like challenge, right? If you want to, because in different environments you might expect different guarantees from version resolution, and then you might have environment that you can say, you know what, here, give me the closest approximation to latest that you can get, but on the other, that won't be enough. So
in the other case, you should just specify the digest. You can pin to a digest if you really care about the version.
Obviously, but digest is not very useful because you don't really know what you have. It's just like a hash. It's non-readable version, which is also a problem. I mean, it's a hard trade-off, no doubt about it. And we just added like tremendous complexity to already complex problem with Pyrsia. My heart literally hurts right now when I try to think about it.
Well, I know GoMod, for example, has hard requirements on Semver, and that's caused issues too. So I think there's things we can learn from other systems where they've tried to enforce behaviors on packages, and that turns out to be tricky because, I mean, we're fighting with GoMod like daily. If you don't have a mono repo, it's just pain.
Yeah, and the real problem is that we try to solve the versioning problem as it was a machine solvable problem. But it's really not, because pesky humans get in the way and ruin everything.
Yeah, I guess I see the freeform tag as a way of saying I defer to the owner of the software to define the meaning of what this is, which has pros and cons, and that's
I mean, it was true if we always resolve from the vendor of the package, but it's not the case. Even if the world of corporate repositories and central Docker Hub, and it's definitely not the case now with Pyrsia.
Well, could it be possible if you went to look up latest in Pyrsia, that Pyrsia then goes trust and compares latest to what's on like Docker Hub to see if it needs to repull?
It could do that. I mean, the ideal state is that you're running Pyrsia as one of the protocols on registries, right? So it just registries expose a Pyrsia node in some way. That could work. Sorry, I haven't spent enough time in the Pyrsia code, but I've written some distributed system stuff before. How do you handle the list of versions and things like that? Is it mutable blocks of some kind, or is it a ledger or something like that? So how do you currently synchronize the state?
That's something Mark can answer.
We currently don't do anything because we haven't finished it yet. But
we are not there yet. Yeah.
Because at a previous company, I worked on a storage system where we had mutable blocks that were we used Paxos to do consensus on that. So you had the notion of mutability in the network as such. but that requires another whole set of of work.
Our biggest challenge is that we want to apply a trust model to allow every node to be configured to implement whatever policy. And which means that we might decide that some updates are valid, some are not, and that's going to be decided differently in different parts of the network, which guarantees that we're going to have different results. And the different results should be at least what are wanted by the people who are getting. Everybody should like their own results, but that means that it's a fragmented view of the world.
What consensus do you use then? Do you trust a bunch of nodes and then can get consensus amongst them, or?
There's a lot that needs to be worked out on that. The fundamental of this is it's going to be signed by an identity, and we'll have various evidence associated with that identity in our blockchain. So given that we know that this person is associated with this company or this country or whatever else we know about them, we might have a policy that says, well, everything from some particular company I trust, everything that came from this particular other company I don't trust. So you might have rules like that.
Yeah, we have that is a even more involved problem, and plus one of the scenarios that we need to consider is the partners that will be co-sponsoring, co-verifying all these things, all these images and the binaries. But the other is how to make sure that the network is not doesn't have attack vectors, right? And figure out how to pick nodes to be trusted. So we haven't reached any of the conclusions there yet.
Yeah, I mean, the only guiding principle is that we can't tell anybody who they should trust, otherwise they have no reason to trust us.
Yeah.
Just to jump back real quick to the proposal, Erwin, will this work with being able to plug in a different registry? So another, like Chris's example, where somebody wants to publish to GCR and to Docker Hub, will this method work?
Yeah.
Or do you have to do multiple steps to kind of, or do we have to do something on the coding side to deal with multiple repositories?
I'm not completely sure what you're asking, but let me give an example.
Well, let me just, right now, we've been talking about Docker Hub. What if I want to put GCR into play?
Yeah, as long as it's, well, at this moment, this won't work yet, but that should be a relatively easy step to take. So the same thing we do for Docker Hub. Mainly, we say to Docker engine, this is the registry mirror, and we point that to a local Pyrsia node, and then the local Pyrsia node gets a request, a pull request for some kind of an image, and he knows, okay, I have to get this on Docker Hub. He knows that because it starts with /library/ and then the image, I think.
Right, right.
He knows that. So when we do the same thing, that is something that has to be done, both in Pyrsia and in some kind of Docker component. I think Docker engine, Chris, I don't know. But there has to be like a setting, a registry mirror setting for, or maybe it's the same setting, but it has to work for content other than Docker Hub content, because it only works for Docker Hub content right now.
So this is what we got working.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, for push, you have the same problem here, right? You need to, like, GCR owns registries, the short names are docker.io prefixed to them. So in this case, it's just gcr.io /namespace/image. You have the same problem. Like, Google own the gcr.io, which means you need to auth against that service before you can push. Otherwise, you can't prove who owns it. So you have the same problem basically for any upstream things. Like, anytime there's a namespace owned by something in the name, you're going to have to defer to them for auth. So I think the same flow applies. I think you should do, if you want to publish content in multiple places, you need to push it to multiple places, but you can still seed the Pyrsia network with a pull-through mechanism of some kind.
Yeah.
Sorry, is that clear? Because I think it's the same problem.
Yeah.
It is the same problem, but we won't be able to use the pull pull trick, right? We'll have to
Yeah, we
work with
will.
GCR
We
and
will.
figure
We
out
will.
what the pull trick is.
We have to implement
Yeah.
it because it's not in Docker D, it's only in container D, I think, but it is possible to implement. And again, it only works for public because otherwise you have the auth problems.
Yeah, yeah. I think public is fine for now. We are only
Mhm.
looking at public everything.
Mhm.
Can,
So I think
can we scroll down? Because Suhendra started writing a comment. Sorry, Erwin, to cut you off.
No. Yeah, I saw that comment too. That's actually, there's something wrong with the GCR
Yeah,
IO.
so can you remove the :/ in the name?
It's just a slash.
Yeah, there's no colon. It's not double slash.
It's actually a host name, basically. GCR.io
Exactly.
is just a host name of the
Okay.
registry.
Okay.
It defaults to HTTPS as well. So that's why I think the Pyrsia : / is elegant, because it's really saying this is a different protocol.
Yeah. So this is, yeah, this needs, so from the discussion, I'll just say, okay. Different implementations, sorry. Okay, I think this is really good conversation. Erwin, do you have an expectation as a, did you want a specific conclusion from this conversation, or can we pause and then come back?
That we all agree on this path is already great, I think. And there are two takeaways, I think, for now. That is, for one, for existing content where we do only pull-through mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's one missing thing, and that's what Chris was saying. It's only implemented in containerd and not in Docker. Well,
yeah,
I'm not very familiar with those.
Yeah, we need to actually, basically, that is a separate research area.
We have to. Well, and that could be maybe not for demo, of course, but rather short term. It could work for custom registries as well, I think, with relatively with not so much effort. The other part, on the other end, with the Pyrsia prefix, that will require some work. Heavy lifting, I guess.
So this we should separate out into separate tickets and start figuring out what.
Well, two tickets basically. One is for the existing and one for the Pyrsia first content.
And I know I said GCR because we were talking about GCR, but the default question we'll ask is, should this work with Artifactory, and what do we need to do? Because we can just doc for Artifactory and find out how difficult it is.
As long as it's public content, I think it should work fine. Well, given that we can set the registry mirror for other content than Docker Hub content.
Yeah, no, we can ask those questions. Authentication, how does that work? Figuring out where the images go. Like, do we need a certain path structure? All those handshake things we can ask with an instance of Artifactory and figure out if the technology needs to be built. Then.
Does it really make sense to have authenticated content in Pyrsia, because Pyrsia content will by default will be public?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah.
Okay. I think we have spent a good chunk of time discussing this.
True.
But it's good. I think this is something we had to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
Time well spent, I think. So we'll move on to the next one, and I think for immediate, you have some next steps, right, Erwin?
Yeah.
You can start splitting that and working on that. So okay, are there any comments on the in progress things, or we are good, right? Meaning we're working on them, we are creating things. There is one ticket that is on triage, but I think that has already been in play for a while. So let's just look through this. And Mark, can you describe this in like few words? I think that is good enough description, and I read some of it.
I'm sorry, which one are we on?
Are you able to see my screen? It's the modify the artifact manager to make every torrent available through DHT.
Okay, so if there have been a few different ones, so could you open that, please, so that I know which one it is, because I started out with a simple ticket, and then it got subdivided a few times.
Okay. You mean the one that is here?
Which
I don't know which one. Is it this one?
So
Is this in
Process.
progress actually? The one that is in, because I clicked only on the triage one. Is this in progress actually? Are you working on this specific one?
If it's in, I'm working on what is in progress. So task is to modify the artifact in the distributed hash table. Yes, that's what I'm working on.
Okay, okay. So no, can you describe this in short for
Well,
people?
conceptually, it's rather simple. In the previous work, I had the artifact manager create a torrent file. Torrent files can be used with a BitTorrent client to pull whatever you want. And so in order to make the torrents available, I just wanted to make them available in the distributed hash table. And just putting it in the hash table was simple enough, but then I wanted to write a unit test. And that meant that I would have to try and get the result from Kademlia, which does not return the result synchronously, but returns the result back as an event. And so to be able to access events, that's where I started going down this rabbit hole of finding out that, oh, these things are going through channels, and that's not going to work very well for scalability or maintainability. And so I put in a different mechanism for that. And then I said, oh, let me try testing it now, and nothing's happening. And I realized, oh, well, there are not going to be any events being sent unless there's a running event loop. And since the event loop is tied into main, I needed to separate it from main, and found out there's a whole lot of other things in the event loop that you might not expect to be tied to. Anyhow, that's
no. So I lost you because you said unit test, and then you talked about a bunch of other systems. So are you building an integration test?
It's
because unit test would be as simple as
it's intended to be a simple unit test, but it doesn't seem to be possible for it to be a simple unit test.
A unit test would
so
be
it's become. When it's all said and done, it's going to be an integration test because there's no way to do just what I want without dragging in a lot of other stuff.
Yeah, so unit test would be simple, right? You take a torrent file or something that looks like a torrent file and put it on a DHT and verify that the DHT is updated in the correct fashion. That would be the end of it.
That's conceptually all I wanted to do, but it's not possible to do just that, apparently.
You cannot manufacture a torrent file?
Oh, I can manufacture the torrent file. I can make the call to ask the DHT to put it on there. But what I can't do is find out if it actually was in there. To pull it out of the torrent file, I need to get the result of that call added to the DHT. The result of that is delivered as an event. So I need to be able to.
And you cannot manufacture that event?
Excuse me?
You cannot manufacture that event? I don't understand why.
Manufacturing the event doesn't prove that anything was added to the DHT. So that's not a valid test.
Yeah. So my comment on this is, I think you're taking on too much, because you're basically building an end-to-end test. Because you're saying Kademlia should be up, Kademlia has something else that should be up, and all of that. And
yeah, I mean, I
that
think,
is too much for this ticket.
I think you're both fundamentally saying the same things, which is he could make it a unit test by mocking, but he is in fact making an integration test.
Yeah, but I think that even the integration test, the scope is too large.
Well, these are issues we're going to have to deal with. So yeah, I could say I'll assume that it's going to work, but then the next task would be to try to consume the this from the distributed hash table.
Exactly, it should be the next task and not in this. So here we are saying we have to build every single Lego piece to make the building, or I'm saying focus on the Lego piece, and this doesn't look like a Lego piece. So I would recommend splitting it down even further and working on the Lego piece instead of saying I need a event loop.
If I can jump in, because I know exactly where Mark is stuck, because that's where I got to before somebody else took over the work. So I understand exactly where he's at and the frustration with trying to figure that out, and I understand that. So my suggestion is, instead of working on how to get that information into your new class or wherever you're trying to, maybe try to do it from the other way around. Try doing it the bottom layer and just trying to expose the information. And this way you can come back to your other work and connect the dots afterwards. That would
I
be my
can't load the
suggestion for you.
information either because it's delivered as an event.
I understand. So I think,
however, whether you want to say the end of this current task is in front of me or behind me, I still need to do what I'm doing to move forward.
I understand. And my suggestion is to open a small PR where you just expose that event and capture it in a unit test. And then you can actually consume it somewhere else in a follow-up PR, which is the work you are already doing.
Expose the event and capture it in a unit test. There's no unit test. All I can do is say, well, I made the call that's supposed to put it there and it didn't blow up on me, but that doesn't prove that it was successful.
I understand that, which is why I'm suggesting you write the unit test to prove that it was successful, right? You need to capture that event and prove it in a unit test, right? That's what Suhun was trying to suggest.
But how do I prove that it was successful when I have?
So Mark, can we take this offline? Because I think
Sure.
every time we come to these kinds of tickets, you always want many other things to be in place, and we go on a goose chase. And I'm trying to focus and say, okay, take a really small problem, solve that, and then keep on building. And it looks like this one is not doing the building blocks part, and that is my concern with this ticket and similar tickets, because we can't have the rest of the world be available for a small thing to work, because the rest of the world is not available, not ready yet.
I understand that, and I'm not saying that the rest of the world has to be available. Just the event loop needs to run. But unfortunately, it has a lot of dependencies that need to be moved along with it, because, I mean, the dependencies shouldn't be there, but they are. But all I want is a very small piece to work. Unfortunately, that small piece is tightly coupled to other stuff that I don't want to have to drag.
And I'm suggesting that you work on decoupling. You work on decoupling, doing the design for decoupling. So that is my comment on this. And I would say that spend time in breaking it down. And if you need help or another pair of eyes, ping me and I can pair with you in breaking this down. I think there are many ways this can be broken down without tripping.
Yeah, the problem is to do it without having things be in a non-working state. And
yeah, so I think that is my comment. So I'll leave it as triage, and let us talk about this before we try to build the rest of the things that relate to this, or depend on the event loop and the cascade of those questions. Here we have like 7 minutes. I made, so going back to the to-do, I made a couple of comments here. Mithali, were you able to look at them? But if not, we can talk about this. But this is basically, I looked at this. This is a blobs module inside our code base, and it has a few aspects to it, but none of that has tests. So this is to add tests and make sure all of that works. And I found
this I added. We don't have any test cases for blobs module. So this is to that, and also you had some comments for, so that also I added in this ticket to take care.
Yeah. The only thing I found out, there was a lot of hard coding, so we should make sure that
we have a lot of hard coded localhost, so that we have to remove once we have the configuration file in, which Steve is working on.
Yeah. Hey, Mithali, do you know if this is functional? Meaning the blobs module itself works, right?
Yes. The whole pull-through mechanism works through that.
Okay, and you know about this, so this is something I can pick up, because I've been looking for places where I can add tests when I know that I'm not affecting other people or breaking anything. But
that would be a good candidate.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Then is there more discussion people want to have? If not, I'll remove the triage.
Feel free to assign yourself.
Yes, I will assign to myself. Assignees. Because this will be this perfect small thing for me to work on. Okay, configure. Oh wait. So this one was adding the configuration. Right? We have a configuration file which has these settings.
Yeah, this is.
Yeah.
So this is for the artifact manager directory. This we talked about already.
Okay.
That we need to have perfect proper permission for that, and also for the CLI config file.
Okay.
Yeah, so for the Pyrsia node side of things, the environment variable is in place and the permissions are in place. It's just to make sure the coding side is utilizing that.
Okay.
Yeah, so that I will be doing it. I'll. Oh, it's already done, Steve.
I put it
Environment-
into the systemd installer.
Okay, okay, I'll check on that.
Yeah,
So
I don't
if you reference that environment variable, it'll resolve to a value.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Integrate. I think I read through this. This is so this is dependent, or this is 273. I think this this relates to, yeah. This is the epic, I think, Mark. From
Yes,
what yeah.
that's
So
what it
this,
looks like.
I think I read through this, and I like that it was split into multiple parts, and I was able to find the pieces as well. Yeah, and there is a tag here, so I'll remove the triage. The triage was automatically labeled. Blocks will be committed. Yeah, this one doesn't have enough description of what is actually happening.
There was a reason it wasn't an issue,
It wasn't
and
an issue.
it wasn't ready to be an issue.
Sorry, what?
It was just a note and not a GitHub issue. So there was a
Oh.
reason, right?
Oh.
You just made that this morning.
Oh yeah, because I didn't see the triage button on it. So then I created an issue, and then eventually the triage button shows up, right? That's why I made it an issue. So what does it need to be?
Probably deleted. I don't know if it's relevant, so I would just
Oh,
delete
okay.
it.
Okay, remove from project, and okay. Okay.
No, don't. Now it just disappeared into the vagueness of outer space.
So delete was the option was remove from project. So.
I know, but you had to like actually click on it and click close and write a comment. It's GitHub.
Oh, that's what you meant.
GitHub's picky. GitHub's picky. It's
Okay,
not
okay.
that smart.
You should be able to find it again, or no?
I can. I'm
Okay. No, I want to do the right thing. Yeah, just reason for closing. We should put that. Modify active. This one is yeah. This one is from that epic 273, because this was a split, and this, I think this is good enough explanation. I read through this, and this has like pieces as well. So I think this is fine. Be picked up. This one, I think this came from a discussion somewhere, and I made some comments on this. It looks like this has like a lot of things are going on in this class, and I think there are suggestions to move it to a separate file, and I made some comments on moving it or breaking it down further.
So this is actually a very exact problem, and Shufei, Christian, and I have been talking a lot. So we need to do a little bit of refactor before I can add the consensus engine into our simple node on top of Shufei's code. And this is just one small little thing that he can do to make that job easier. So
yeah,
the same
so when
thing.
you add when you add the consensus engine, it should not go inside network.rs. That is my only comment. It should be
no. But the consensus engine needs network RS, so I can move all the rest of the code.
Yeah,
So
it can need
network RS is already in place. There's less work to do, right? And there's going to be a smaller PR.
Yeah. It can need all of that, but the consensus stuff, I should be able to read through that separately without wondering about what is this network.
Absolutely, 100%. That's what our goal is.
Yeah. Refactor signature structure to use this. And I think go to issue.
Again, the consensus engine we're using has very exact requirements for the definition of a signature. And the crate that I started with for my prototype, and this is just to move the code, right? We're only in the mode of moving code. This is not the final code, right? So this crate's the one that libp2p uses under the hood. And we're going to start with that so we can have all the code in one place. And it's just to modify Shufei's signature to use this crate.
Yeah, so I think, so here is my confusion with this is like when I went to here, right? I couldn't find what this relates to, or because
that's a bug in the GitHub UI.
Yeah, this is huge.
That's
I can't
not
find
your
it
fault.
here. So what I would
doesn't
ask,
know how to open resolved conversations.
Yeah. So what I would ask is, if you know where this came from, then put that conversation into the comment. So that the thing is, like, if I come and say, okay, I want to work on something, and I pick this.
That I can't do. That I cannot do. So again, the GitHub UI is not smart enough to open up the hidden items that are resolved.
So you cannot see the resolved conversation at all?
I can't hear with the crying coming from your mic. I apologize.
Sorry.
the link goes to the right place. It's just the GitHub UI that isn't smart enough to open up the conversation that's been resolved. So if you actually scrolled down and opened up all the conversations, you would actually see the right box being highlighted, unfortunately for us.
Yes, and then but the conversation is gone. So how do we bring the text back to the ticket?
GitHub is actively working on solving the problem.
No. Okay, as humans, can I ask you to put the relevant context in this comment box?
Okay, yes.
So
It's a lot of work.
So
but
I know there is
will
automation
screenshot it and drop it in there for you.
Yeah. That's what I'm asking. That for somebody who has no context, can you put enough context that would say, okay, this is how it helps, and that would help me pick up, for example. Sorry, I am going all over the place. This one.
Chris, if you unresolve that conversation, would it show back up?
Yes, it would. That's the whole problem. We can A, resolve conversations, or B, have links that work. I mean,
maybe just leave it as an unresolved conversation and just to put a comment in there. This is really resolved.
I know, but at the same token, then it's hard to track which ones are done and which ones are not done.
Yeah, I know. It's a catch-22.
It's a quid pro quo, and like, which way do you want to go? If I have to take extra screenshots, I guess I'll take extra screenshots. I mean, what do you want?
Yeah. Hey, we are 2 minutes past, and I think we covered all the triage items in to do. One thing I wanted to show, and this is something that Steve had asked for, to rename master to main for Pyrsia. I just did it. I wanted to show you that I did it, and if it is going to break anything, then I can reverse it back to master for now until you tell me that all your automation is okay.
It's going to be fine. It's not going to break anything because we're not going after specific branches.
It actually will, because the fork actually had GitHub Action set up, and I'm pretty sure they were hard coded to master.
I'll double check that.
Oh, I think GitHub should be.
No. So it changed the branch for you, and it changed there's no rules, so that should be fine.
Yeah, I don't remember there being any if then else's in that GitHub Action.
Wow.
But I could be wrong.
Yeah, I don't even know if they're running actually. Now that I don't know if I enabled it or not. So.
Okay, so I'm going to close this then. Okay, because I did whatever was required here.
No.
And it didn't involve any coding. Okay.
It does. We need to make sure it was done completely and thoroughly. I mean, we shouldn't just close it if we don't know if it's done.
Okay. What do you mean thoroughly?
Yeah. So that action is referring to master.
Okay.
Yeah, like you said, I don't think it's being run.
Okay. So
we should run the unit tests for that library if we're gonna work on it ourselves.
Yeah, we should. Okay, so then this is more involved. So I'll make those comments here. But given that we are 4 minutes past, I think this is a good time to end for today. Okay, and this is back. So I'll put the comments that you made, Chris, about running the test and fixing the GitHub action before we close this.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you. Bye.
All right, thanks.
Steve, can you hang on for a second, Steve?
Sure.
Hey, Elliot, can you Zoom separately?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, please. So this is a stand-up thing that gets recorded. So.
Yeah. Steve, I'll ping you.
Okay, sounds good.